They hid my adoption papers for 28 years and forged documents to cut me out of their will. I only found out the truth because a private investigator knocked on my door and told me I was born into royalty. Hi, I'm Everly. I was raised to believe I was just the artsy middle child. But the truth? I was never part of their plan. I was the family secret they buried. What would you do if the people who raised you erased your identity just to keep their perfect image intact? If you've ever felt like your story was stolen, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me, when did you realize love had conditions? Let's rewind to the brunch where they sat me at the kids' table, and I realized I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased. I need you to move to the kids' table, Everly. I froze for a second, standing with my leather tote still slung over one shoulder. The hostess glanced apologetically and gestured toward the tiny round table near the toddler play area. I looked back at the main table, long, pristine, filled with laughter and 12 seats, all filled, except mine. I'm with the Aldridge party, I said calmly. She nodded, checking the tablet. Yes. You're Everly, right? They specifically requested the side table for you. I'm really sorry. My fingers tightened on the strap. I walked slowly to the side table and sat down. The utensils were perfectly arranged, the linen napkin folded into a swan, a detail I used to help Mom with before big holiday meals. Nobody at the big table turned around. When the waiter arrived, he offered me the same mimosa they were all drinking. I took it, sipped once. It tasted like soap and syrup. I set it down. From where I sat, I could see Kara laughing, gesturing animatedly as she recounted some story about her firm's expansion into Portland. Dad nodded along like he was on a conference call. Judith, my mother, raised her glass and said, to Kara, regional director, and to Mason's engagement. Our family shines. The word family landed like glass breaking. No mention of me. I reached into my tote and pulled out the linen-wrapped scones I had baked that morning. Blueberry, Dad's favorite. I had meant to pass them around. Instead, I unwrapped one and placed it silently in front of me. The buttery scent felt cruel now. I let the conversation wash over me like rain. I couldn't stop. Kara's new condo. Dad's investor. Judith's gala plans. Everything perfectly curated. Everything performative. Then Judith looked over, not even directly at me, just over, and said, Everly, honey, you've always been so artsy. So emotional. Don't let that isolate you. Like it was advice. Like she hadn't spent years twisting that very trait into a liability. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did, crouched behind the floral curtain outside the kitchen when I was 9, clutching the corners with frosting still on my face from the birthday cake. Judith's voice was hushed but sharp. I can't keep faking it. We should have never agreed to the adoption. She was a mistake. Charles had muttered something I didn't catch, maybe, she's already here, just make it work. That night, I smiled through the candles. Because I thought if I smiled hard enough, I'd belong. I felt heat rise behind my eyes but kept still. My voice was even. I saw the trust update. Everyone paused. Kara's hand stopped midair with her glass. What are you talking about? Charles asked without looking up from his tablet. The trust, I said louder. The one for Lake Vermont. I saw the amendment. I'm not in it. Judith smiled tightly. That's complicated, darling. You've been distant. We made decisions for the family's continuity. Kara added, you were never into property law. It's not personal. But it is, I said, reaching into my bag. I placed a manila envelope on the table beside my plate. Judith stiffened. Charles finally looked up. I helped purchase that property. I continued. Transferred $43,000 when you needed it. Here's the receipt. And the notarized document. Signed by all three of you.
Kara scoffed.
You kept that? Everly, seriously? You erased me from your will, I said. I'm just putting myself back in. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was cold.
Strategic.
Judith placed her napkin down like she was ending a board meeting.
Kara took a long drink.
I stood. My voice didn't shake. You know what hurts most? Not the money. Not even the lies. It's that you said I shouldn't have existed. That adoption ruined your plan. Judith flinched. That wasn't, she started, but stopped. You said it, I whispered. I was there. I was 9. Nobody responded. I gathered my bag. Somewhere behind me, a little girl pointed and tugged at her mom's sleeve. Why is that lady sitting all by herself? She asked aloud. The mother pulled her closer, shushing her, as if shame was contagious. On my way out, I caught the faintest flicker in Kara's hand. She slipped a folded document into her purse, her fingers moving too deliberately to be casual. I stored it in the back of my mind. As I passed the photo wall in the hallway, I saw it, the clean square on the wall where my graduation picture used to hang. The dust halo around it like a missing tooth.
Not a single photo of me left.
At the door, I turned back once. Kara was mid-sip again. Charles had already gone back to his tablet. Judith sat still, unreadable. Then my phone vibrated. J. Whitmore, private investigator. Everly Morrow, there's something about your birth you need to know. And just like that, the erasure was no longer symbolic. It was strategic, intentional, and it was over. I stepped outside, the wind off Lake Vermont sharp against my cheeks. But for the first time in a long time, I felt awake. I'm not just adopted, I told Whitmore as the city moved behind his car window. I was hidden. He didn't answer right away. Just tapped the steering wheel gently while the turn signal blinked. The sun was barely above the skyline, casting a wash of cold blue across the sidewalk. We were headed toward a church I hadn't seen in 20 years. Whitmore glanced at me, then back to the road. You ready for this?
No.
But I nodded. The church looked smaller than I remembered. Stone walls, cracked steps, and an iron plaque half obscured by moss. St. Augustine's Children's Refuge. It smelled of cedar and wet brick. As we stepped inside, a rush of silence swallowed us. No choir, no footfall, just stillness. Whitmore had already arranged access to the archive. A volunteer in her 60s unlocked a dusty cabinet and retrieved a cream folder marked Morrow. E. My breath snagged. Inside were papers yellowed by time, a copy of my intake form, a list of vaccinations, and at the bottom, an envelope labeled, Biological Record Confidential. Whitmore slid on gloves and handled it like a lit match. The first document was a birth certificate. Not the one I had grown up memorizing. This one bore a different date, a different name for mother. And under father, it said simply, Unknown, Royal Registry, Ravenhurst Estate, UK. I blinked. What the hell is this? It's real, Whitmore said quietly. It was never meant to disappear, but someone made sure it did. The second paper was a hospital transfer order signed by Judith Aldridge with a handwritten note. File under private. For Aldridge household only. It was dated 2 weeks after my birth. My hands started shaking. We drove to the county records office next. The staff were indifferent until Whitmore flashed his badge. One keyword unlocked a sealed record. My name. Next to it, a field labeled Amended Custody File, locked in 1998. The reason code, Special Family Transfer, Confidential Benefactor. I stepped outside the building and sat on the edge of a concrete planter. Wind pressed my coat flat. My voice was barely a whisper.
They didn't just take me in.
They erased everything else. Later that evening, I sat across from Judith at her kitchen island. I hadn't called first. I didn't knock. She turned, surprised to see me. Then she saw the folder in my hand. "The truth," I said. Judith stared at me like I was ungrateful for breathing. "We gave you everything, Everly. You were nothing when we took you in." Have you ever been told, directly or silently, that your existence was a burden? That you were only accepted under conditions you never agreed to? If you felt that kind of betrayal from the people meant to love you, leave a comment number 7 below. Let's see what happened when I decided to reclaim the truth. I didn't blink.
No.
I was someone. You just buried her. And now I'm digging her out. She tried to scoff, but her throat caught. You don't understand the world you're stepping into. The Ravenhusts are my blood. I cut in. Not a charity project. Not a tax deduction. Not someone you could sculpt into your version of quiet. You're being dramatic, she hissed. We saved you.
No.
You kidnapped me with paperwork. I snapped. You orchestrated a disappearance and called it a favor. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was revealing. Judith didn't deny it. I leaned forward just enough for her to flinch. You didn't protect me. You silenced me. For status. For optics. For Kara. Her eyes flickered. Yeah, I said. I know. She looked at the birth certificate without touching it. That doesn't change anything. It changes everything. You knew I had a family, a name, a legacy, and you hid it. Her expression didn't flinch. You were safer with us. You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your control. You kept me as the project you could shape, not the person I was. She finally spoke softer, like she was tired. We lost our third application for biological children. We were desperate. The Ravenhusts needed privacy. It was mutual. But you never told me. Not once. Because once you knew, we knew we'd lose you. You lost me anyway, I said. My phone buzzed. A new message. From Whitmore. Found her. Amelia Ravenhust. Your grandmother. She's alive. And she's been looking for you. My knees buckled slightly as I read the screen. Judith stood silent. She's expecting you, I added, voice dry. Judith turned away. Go, she said after a pause. You already made up your mind. I stepped outside into the sharp night. Streetlights blinked overhead like distant eyes. Somewhere behind me, the door clicked shut. I didn't look back. The archive room smelled of old varnish and ghost prayers. When the drawer opened, a draft stirred, like something knew it had waited long enough to be found. The volunteer looked at me once, kindly, and said, Some files don't like to stay buried. They find a way back. At the records office, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting sterile shadows. I noticed the staff glance at each other when my file unlocked, like they'd seen ghosts before, but not one that talked back. When Judith finally turned away after our confrontation, the kitchen light hit only half her face. The rest stayed in shadow. Even the silence of the house felt planned. As I stepped outside, the air tasted like metal. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, even though it wasn't Sunday. A strange, timed echo, as if history itself had taken sides. The gate alone looked like it belonged to another world. Wrought iron with golden crests, old as history, flanked by stone lions. Past it stretched a driveway lined with winterbear sycamores, and at the end stood the Ravenhust estate, 3 stories of gray stone, stained glass, and silence that demanded respect. I sat in the back of Whitmore's black sedan, hands locked in my lap. He didn't speak, just glanced at me through the rearview mirror once before we stopped. You can still turn around, he said. No, I answered, opening the door. Lady Amelia Ravenhurst waited in the foyer like a statue from another time, upright, silver-haired, hands folded, emerald brooch catching the low chandelier light. She didn't smile. You have her eyes, she said finally. I would know them anywhere.
My mouth was dry.
And you're my grandmother, she said, stepping forward. Amelia Catherine Lonsdale Ravenhurst. And until today, I thought I had lost you for good. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe. I just nodded, as if that gesture alone could hold together my insides. She motioned me into a parlor that felt more like a private museum, oil paintings of long-gone nobility, carved shelves, and a fireplace with quiet flames already burning. I assume they didn't tell you anything, she said, pouring tea without asking. They told me I was adopted. Eventually. But not by who, not why, and not that you existed. I tried to find you. I tried everything. Her voice cracked for the first time. They sealed the files, then claimed custody on mental health grounds. Said your mother was unfit. Said they were distant cousins. It was all lies. I sat stiffly on the edge of a velvet armchair. Why didn't you fight harder? She looked me dead in the eye. Because I didn't know who had you until it was too late. And by then, the Aldridges had already buried the trail with money and silence. A knock came at the door. A butler stepped in. Apologies, ma'am. The media has arrived. She looked at me. Are you ready to correct the record? I followed her out to the courtyard. A podium had been set up on the stone terrace. Below us, reporters had gathered. Whispers, flashes, cameras angled up. Kara's press photo had been in enough of these setups. But now it was mine. Lady Amelia walked to the mic first. Her voice was clear. 28 years ago, my daughter's child was taken under circumstances we now know were manipulated. Today, I stand beside my granddaughter, Everly Ravenhurst, and publicly recognize her as the sole blood heir to the Ravenhurst name and legacy. Then she stepped aside. I walked up. My heart pounded, but my hands didn't shake. They hid my name, my history, my blood. They said it was for my own good. I began. But it wasn't. It was for control. It was theft dressed as guardianship. And now I'm here to reclaim what was always mine. A murmur swept the crowd. That evening, news outlets across the state ran the headline. Ravenhurst heir found. Family hid adoption for decades. Kara's name trended below mine. And Judith? She didn't answer my calls. But someone else did, Channel 12, the same station Kara had used for years to build her image. We'd like to schedule a sit-down interview, the anchorwoman said. You tell your story. Live. I didn't hesitate. Said it. At 7:42 p.m., Judith's silence broke. A family acquaintance forwarded me a screenshot from a closed Facebook group. Her post read, Families are complicated. Sometimes what you do to protect a child is misunderstood later. The comments were full of sympathy.
Praise.
One even said, You're so strong, Judith. Let love win. Let love win. I slammed my phone down on the counter so hard the spoon beside it jumped. An hour later, Kara's voice filled my TV screen. She was seated at her marble kitchen island, bathed in soft lighting, voice just on the edge of trembling. I've always supported my sister. I don't know why she's doing this now, but we've all suffered. We've all lost something. It was performative, curated for guilt. I muted it. The camera caught the angle of her ring, Ravenhurst heirloom. She must have stolen it when she realized the narrative was slipping away. I texted Whitmore. She's wearing the ring. The green sapphire. 2 minutes later, his reply, "She had no legal claim to it. I'll handle it." The next morning, headlines turned. The Tribune published a follow-up. Inside the Aldridge cover-up, $43,000 transfer. Forged signatures. Missing graduation photos. Below it, a photo of me, not from a post-shoot but from the podium the night before. Sharp.
Clear.
Like someone who had returned from exile with fire in her mouth. Kara's friends were now texting me apologies. One just said, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You looked powerful." But I didn't want apologies. I wanted acknowledgement. And I wanted the next blow. Channel 12 confirmed the date. 2 days from now, a live interview. It wouldn't be just about reclaiming my name. It would be about exposing theirs. But Kara wasn't done. That afternoon, Whitmore sent a message. She's contacted a media firm, preparing a counter-narrative. My jaw clenched. She always played the PR game. She didn't know I was coming with truth, not branding. At night, I stood by the window in one of the Ravenhurst guest rooms, overlooking a frozen garden and 3 stone statues. One of them, a girl with a book in her lap, had a chip on her cheek. I touched the glass and whispered. They gave me silence. I'm giving them history. The wind held just right, as if the estate itself approved. The courthouse steps were slick with morning frost when I arrived. A handful of photographers stood behind the rope line, whispering my name, cameras poised like loaded rifles. This wasn't just a custody clarification. This was war. Inside, the courtroom was all polished wood and airless silence. The kind that made you forget your lungs knew how to work. Judith sat at the plaintiff's table in a gray suit like armor. Kara sat beside her in burgundy, lips perfectly lined, spine rigid. They looked like they'd spent hours rehearsing their grief. I didn't sit. Not at first. I stood in front of them, folder in hand, waiting for the judge to enter. Kara wouldn't meet my gaze. Judith did and smiled. That smile said, "You're too late." When the judge finally called us to order, the opposing counsel wasted no time. He launched into a carefully practiced performance, a tale of emotional instability, hospital records, mentions of my therapy following the accident. "She has a documented history of trauma-related dissociation," he said, gesturing toward me like I was a thread on the witness stand. "She has demonstrated patterns of delusional thinking, including inventing royal lineage." I didn't flinch. When it was our turn, Ms. Rowe rose.
Calm.
Elegant.
Precise.
"We'd like to introduce this," she said, holding up a thin, gold-edged envelope. A handwritten codicil to the will of the late Arthur Ravenhurst. Dated and notarized. The judge opened it carefully. In it, Mr. Ravenhurst acknowledges Ms. Everly Morrow as the sole surviving heir, affirms her mental capacity, and condemns the prior suppression of her identity by the Aldridge household.
Gasps.
Audible. Kara froze. Judith looked straight ahead, jaw clenched so tightly it made her temples pulse. But we weren't done. Ms. Rowe continued. "We also submit a recording, taken legally by our investigator, of Ms. Kara Aldridge admitting to altering documents in the Lake Vermont property transfer." The judge leaned forward. "Is this corroborated?" "Yes, Your Honor. It matches the original document signed by all parties, including Ms. Morrow. The notary's signature is intact." Kara shot up from her chair. That recording was private. She wasn't supposed to. The judge held up a hand. "Sit down. Have you ever had to gather every shred of truth just to be believed? To prove you weren't crazy, just silenced? If you've ever stood your ground while being painted as the villain, leave a comment number 9 below. Because what came next wasn't just a win. It was a reckoning." I turned to face them. You didn't just cut me out of a trust, I said quietly. You tried to erase me. Again. Only this time, I kept the receipts. Kara opened her mouth, closed it. No words. Judith blinked slowly, then said, You've always been unstable, Everly. We had to protect the estate. I laughed once.
Dry. No.
You had to protect your lie. And you failed. The judge took a long breath. Pending verification of these documents, I see no grounds to question Ms. Morrow's mental competence or legal claim to the estate. Mediation is hereby ordered. Ms. Morrow will be represented as full party. It was over, at least this round. But the final blow came outside. A journalist shoved a mic toward Kara. Did you really falsify documents to block your sister's inheritance? Kara turned, cold, furious. No comment. The next morning, that phrase was the headline. Kara Aldrich, no comment on fraud claims. The silence said everything. Back at the estate, I dropped my bag in the hallway and walked barefoot down the stone corridor. Each echo of my steps reminded me, this wasn't borrowed power. It was mine. In the study, Lady Amelia waited with a glass of red wine and her usual stillness. You didn't just win, she said, handing me the glass. You exposed them. I don't want celebration, I replied. I want them to know I'm not finished. She nodded once. Then make sure they feel it. That night, headlines raged. Kara's law license was now under review. Judith's name trailed trending lists with words like inheritance fraud, emotional abuse, and legal manipulation. But that wasn't the part that broke them. The part that broke them came from the inside. A former housekeeper, anonymous but verified, released photos of my childhood room stripped bare just days after my accident. The caption read, They told us she wasn't coming back. They tossed her sketchbooks first. It went viral. People remembered. People turned. But Kara wasn't done. At 3:14 a.m., Whitmore forwarded me a leak, a legal memo from a boutique PR law firm hired by Kara. They were preparing to file a petition for trust freeze, claiming I was mentally unfit to handle estate finances due to post-accident cognitive decline. It was bold, but also desperate. She was trying to block me from accessing what I'd already won. I stared at the memo in the dark, phone screen lighting the bed like a courtroom lamp. Below the memo was a media plan draft, suggested headlines, A heir's delusion, when trauma masquerades as legacy. I whispered into the empty room. She wants war again. Then I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out the diary. Not mine. My mother's. Amelia had given it to me after court. Inside was a page dated the week I was taken. They said a new name would keep her safe. But how do you protect a soul by erasing it? I closed the book. Not in grief, but in resolve. In the morning, Ms. Rowe would file for a court injunction to stop Kara's petition. But I wouldn't wait. This time, I'd fight in public. Let Kara try to rewrite me. I'd make sure the world remembered exactly who held the pen. The studio lights hit harder than I expected. They always did on live TV, sharp, blinding, meant to expose. I adjusted the mic clip to my lapel, smoothed the hem of my navy blouse, and nodded once to the producer behind the glass. Through the haze, I saw Kara already seated on the opposite side of the set. She wore muted ivory and a soft smile, the kind meant to say, I'm the reasonable one. Her fingers curled slightly around the armrest, knuckles white. I knew that grip. She was nervous. I was not. The anchor's voice crackled in my earpiece. 3, 2. I inhaled once and smiled. And we're live. Welcome back, the host said smoothly. Tonight's conversation centers on legacy, family, and the truth that sometimes divides them. With us are two sisters, Kara Aldridge and Everly Morrow Ravenhurst. Kara turned first. Of course. I want to say this has never been about money, she began, voice silky. It's about trust. My sister's memory has suffered. She's been through trauma. We all have. And sometimes, when you're hurt, you invent versions of reality that feel better than the truth. I didn't interrupt. Not yet. She continued. I love Everly. But this attack? It's been painful for all of us. We just want healing. The host turned to me. Everly. I leaned forward. My memory is fine. And the truth doesn't require cushioning. Let's not forget, this isn't a family squabble. This is theft, falsification, and decades of silencing. Kara blinked. Just once. The host raised a brow. You're saying this was intentional? I'm saying Judith and Kara erased my name from every document they could reach. From every photo, from every property. And then they painted me unstable for remembering who I was. Kara's smile faltered. You don't know what it was like, Everly. The pressure. The expectations. You always took everything so personally. Because it was personal, I snapped. You wore my family ring on TV before I even knew who I belonged to. Kara's eyes narrowed. I earned that position. You didn't even know how to spell Ravenhurst until last year. I tilted my head, yet it's on my birth certificate, and on every legal document since the court reinstated my claim. The host stepped in. We've received documents from your attorney, Everly, confirming your status as heir. But Kara, your firm circulated a statement this morning implying Everly has exhibited mental instability. Is that official? Kara hesitated. I never authorized that language. I turned toward the camera. Then let's clear it up, I said, because I brought something. From my bag, I pulled a laminated page, blown-up copy of a diary entry. Not mine. My mother's. I read it aloud. They say a new name will keep her safe. But how do you protect a soul by erasing it? I looked back at Kara. That was written the week I was taken. The only person unstable here is the one who thinks silence equals safety. The room was dead quiet. Then the host murmured, We'll be right back. The commercial light blinked red. Kara stood too fast. This was supposed to be civil. I stood too. That stopped being possible the moment you tried to gaslight an entire bloodline. Her eyes flashed. You'll ruin everything. I'm not the one who built it on lies. She grabbed her purse and stormed off set. Backstage, staff whispered. A PA handed me water, hands trembling. You okay? She asked. I've never been more. That night, the clip aired in full. By morning, I had 37 voicemails. The Tribune headline read, Everly strikes back. Broadcast breakdown exposes family cover-up. But the real message came in silence. Judith didn't respond. Kara disappeared from social media. Her law firm issued a statement that they were reviewing recent ethical concerns. And I stood in the marble foyer of the Ravenhurst estate, the sun pouring in like a coronation. But just as I reached for the banister, Whitmore called. She's filed the petition. Officially. Mental health clause. Trust freeze attempt. I nodded, calm. She wants a war in court, I said. I think she's about to get one. After the segment aired, the network studio was silent. Not out of discomfort, but awe. A technician whispered to another, That was the first time I've seen someone slice truth like that with calm. The editing room replayed the clip 3 times before sending it out. One of the interns cried during the part Everly read the diary aloud. Later that evening, I sat alone in my room at the estate. The television was off. No news feed, just the old wooden silence of Ravenhurst and the ticking of a grandfather clock down the hall. I could still feel the studio floor under my feet, smooth, cold, too clean. I remembered the faint hum of the teleprompter, the soft shifting of the cameraman's boots behind the lens. Every sound had felt rehearsed until my voice shattered that pattern. "You didn't even raise your voice," Lady Amelia told me at dinner. "I didn't need to," I answered. "The facts did the shouting." She clinked her wineglass softly. That night, I opened my old diary and wrote a single sentence. "When they run out of lies, they call you crazy." Then I added, "Let them." The next morning, I stood by the gates of the estate, press already forming a line. One reporter shouted, "Is it true she's challenging your mental state again?" I smiled, even as flashbulbs flared. "I hope she's ready," I said. Then I stepped back inside, heels clicking like war drums on marble. It had begun. The grand hall of Ravenhurst glowed with late afternoon light, gold spilling through tall glass windows, bouncing off the black and white marble like firelight. Today wasn't a party. It was a reckoning. The invitation was clear. Private reception. Recognition ceremony. What they didn't know was that I had extended the guest list. Kara and Judith arrived fashionably late, of course. Kara wore navy this time, perhaps in a subconscious echo of the outfit I had worn the night I reclaimed my name on air. Judith walked like a woman entering a country club, not a courtroom. They didn't see the envelope in my hand. Lady Amelia met them at the foot of the staircase. "You're here." Kara smiled. "We came for peace." I stepped forward. "Then you're in the wrong place." The room hushed. Cameras lined the far wall. Not media, family archivists. The Ravenhursts didn't forget history. They etched it. Amelia raised her glass. "We begin." No speeches. Just presence. I walked to the pedestal at the center of the room. On it sat a crest, the Ravenhurst seal, newly restored. I placed my hand on it, and then I turned. For 28 years, I was told my name didn't matter, that my story was inconvenient, that being quiet was safer. I said, "But silence doesn't protect. It erases." I locked eyes with Judith. "You called that love." She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her speak. "You raised me to serve your image, to be the backup daughter, the shadow to Kara's spotlight. And when I didn't fit, you cut me out like a typo." A gasp. Not from the guests. From Kara. "You think this is revenge?" she asked, stepping forward. "This is cruelty, Everly." "No," I said. Cruelty was turning my hospital room into a filing cabinet. Cruelty was deleting my existence from every family record. Judith's voice trembled. "We made mistakes." "You made choices," I replied. Then I held up the envelope. "This is your letter of disinheritance. Effective immediately, by order of the Ravenhurst Estate Trustees. You'll vacate the Lake Vermont property within 30 days. And your access to the trust is frozen, pending audit." Judith stumbled. Kara lunged forward. "You can't do that." "I just did." Security didn't touch them. They didn't need to. Humiliation was a quieter kind of violence. And this room, this family no longer belonged to them. They left without speaking another word. When the doors closed, Amelia nodded. "Now we finish what they started." She handed me a small box. Inside, my mother's original ring, the one Kara had stolen and I had reclaimed. I placed it on my finger. It fit. Later that evening, I walked alone through the south garden. The wind off the hills was soft, almost merciful. At the far wall, where ivy grew wild, I tucked a folded photo behind the vines, a picture of me at 8, holding a notebook, a ribbon in my hair. I whispered to her, "You made it." Then I turned and walked back to the house. Not to prove anything, just to begin again. The house was quiet again, but not empty. Each room felt like it had been rewired, cleared of tension, rewritten by choice. In the west corridor, I paused at a mirror framed in carved mahogany. For the first time in years, I didn't avoid my reflection. I studied it, not to fix,
Just to see.
the face was the same, the eyes older, the posture straighter. But the silence around me didn't scream anymore. It hummed. A few days later, I visited the Lake Vermont property one last time. The keys were mine again, not for revenge, but for release. I walked through each room with bare feet, remembering the places I used to sit. The corner where I read books, the table where no one ever asked my opinion, and the porch, where I waited once for a birthday that never arrived. I found one last thing in the attic, a scarf I had knit at 14. No one ever wore it. I folded it once and left it behind. Then I locked the door. On the drive back, Whitmore called. Judith and Kara signed. No appeal. I know, I said. I felt it. At dusk, I stood again in the garden wall at Ravenhurst, where I had hidden the photo. Next to it now was something else. A ribbon.
Red. Frayed.
Still tied in a loose knot. No one confessed to placing it there. But I didn't need to know who. I just knew it was real. At dinner, Lady Amelia lifted her glass. To silence, she said. I smiled. To rewriting it. And for the first time in my life, I raised mine without hesitation. The air was calm, not because they were gone, but because I had finally chosen to stay. I no longer live in the shadow of someone else's silence. I walk the halls of my own name, unafraid, unhidden, and wholly mine. Peace didn't find me, I chose it. What I've learned is simple. Silence is not kindness, and loyalty means nothing without truth. You can love someone and still walk away when that love asks you to disappear. Have you ever been erased by the people who claim to protect you? If you've ever had to fight to be seen, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. Your voice deserves space too.